Please settle in now. Our service is about to begin. Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the Unitarian Universalist Congregation of the South Jersey Shore, a welcoming and inclusive faith community. Thank you for joining us. We who bring a teaching of hope, we who bring a saving message, who welcome all in our doors, the joyful, the heartbroken, atheists and Christians, Muslims and Jews, lesbian, gay, bi, queer, straight, trans, cisgender, all who are searching, seeking, looking for more meaning, more service, more love. All of us gathered here together. My name is Betsy Urbaugh, and I'm your worship associate today. I'm a member of the congregation since 2013 and currently serve on the board of trustees. Our worship service today is led by our minister, Reverend Don Fortune. Video of the service and a printable copy of the sermon will be available on our website and on Facebook later today. If you would like to tweet during the service today, please use hashtag UUCSJS. If you are hard of hearing, closed captioning of the entire service is available on the YouTube recording that will be posted this afternoon. If you're joining us via computer or smartphone, you are encouraged to type any joys or concerns in the chat box area on your screen. In most platforms, the chat box can be accessed by an icon at either the top or bottom of the page, and the chat section will open where you can leave a comment, and you can also read others' comments. Please remember that this video will be on the internet, so please do not share information best kept private. Welcome to worship.
Welcome. Welcome, you who come in need of healing, you who are confused or who have been betrayed. Welcome with your problems and your pain. Welcome to your joys and your wonderings. Welcome your need to hope, your longing for assurance. Instead of answers, here may you find safety for your questions. Instead of promises, may you find community for your struggles. People with hands and hearts to join you in engaging the challenges and changes of our day. Our chalice lighting this morning comes to us from my friend and colleague, Reverend Gretchen Haley. It begins now in the imagination. It starts here in this moment, in this breath. You feel rising in your chest, this beat building between us, the healing, the hunger, the hope, the courage, the calling, the commitment, the drawing out of a new day. It begins now in the imagination, in this story we weave together, this song we sing, this prayer we bring into being, from our hearts to our lips, from our hands to our life, our shared life. It starts here with praise and thanksgiving, forgiveness, and this humble centering, confession that we could be wrong, this promise that we make to keep learning, to keep trying, to keep our sense of humor, to keep close, this knowing that we are all in this together. So come, let us begin. Come, let us worship together. I invite you now to sing along at home as we join in our gathering hymn, Wake Now My Senses.
Wake now my senses and hear the earth call. Feel the deep power of being in awe. Keep with the web of creation your vow. Giving, receiving, as love shows us how. Wake now my reason, reach out to the new. Join with each pilgrim who quests for the true. Honor the beauty and wisdom of time. Suffer thy limit and praise the sublime. Wake now compassion, give heed to the cry. Voices of suffering fill the wide sky. Take as your neighbor both stranger and friend, praying and striving their hardship to end. Wake now my vision of ministry clear. Brighten my pathway with radiance here. Mingle my calling with all who will share. Work toward a planet transformed by our care.
So, something happened this week. Something important and big and a little bit scary. A large group of angry people attacked our nation's Capitol building in Washington, D.C. And that's the place where our laws are made. They interrupted an important part of our democracy, and tried to stop the election of our new president. Maybe you saw some of that on TV, and I hope you had a chance to talk to your grown-ups about it. So I have a piece of paper here. It's smooth, it's flat, it's brand new. I just took it out of the package this morning. We can use this paper for anything we want. We could draw on it, write on it, cut it into shapes. If you have a piece of paper around, you can try this with me. I want you to crumple it up into a ball. What can we use this paper for now? Not much of anything, I'm afraid, except maybe throwing it around, and it's not even really good for that. Now, here's what we're gonna try. We're gonna smooth this paper back out, okay? Does it look the same as it did before? I mean, I smoothed it as good as I can, but it's never gonna look like it did before, right? Now, we're talking about imagination this month, so I'm gonna ask you to use your imaginations. Are you ready? I want you to imagine a town. It's a nice little town. There's a big willow tree at the edge of town, and it sits next to a slow-moving creek. There's a main street with shops and restaurants, an elementary school, and a paper mill. There are 4 blocks of houses on the east side of Main Street and 2 blocks of houses on the west side. Can you see it? It's a lovely place to live. Well, most of the residents think so anyway. Lately, the residents of the west side of town have not been happy. As a matter of fact, they are angry. You see, the west side of town has fewer streets, but those streets have many beautiful parks with lovely fountains. It's one of the things that makes living on the west side so special. As a matter of fact, that willow tree and creek I described a little bit earlier, well, that is one of the main attractions of living on the west side. The residents of the west side of town are angry because the east side residents have begun demanding the same number of parks and fountains that the west side has. The west siders like being the ones with the nice things, and they don't like the idea that the east side might get those same things. How would the west side be special if the east side had the same things they do? One day, the residents of the west side get so angry, they march down the street telling everyone about how angry they are. They march down Main Street past the shops and the restaurants and the elementary school. They march right up to the paper mill, and then they march right inside. The people working there making and packaging paper are surprised. No one's ever marched inside the paper mill like that before. This was always such a nice, quiet town. The West Siders are so angry that they start crumpling up all the paper. Paper after paper after paper, all crumpled up. When all the paper in the mill is crumpled up, the West Siders look around and they can't believe what they've done. They were so angry, and they weren't thinking about what they were doing. They apologized to the workers. They said sorry to the mill owner. They tried to flatten all that paper back out, but the edges stayed rolled up. There are creases and wrinkles all over each piece. No matter how hard they try, the West Siders can't make the paper look like it did before it was all crumpled up. And no apology can undo what they've done. No amount of trying to fix the paper can make it look new again. Now, the East Side residents, they heard all that commotion and they came down to the paper mill too. When they see what happened to all the paper, they're shocked. What will they use for their letters? What will the children use to do their schoolwork? How could the West Siders do such a thing? But then a child steps out from the crowd. They take a piece of the crumpled, ruined paper and they flatten it back out. They take a little bit of red crayon from their pocket and they start to shade the paper. And it's now the most lovely color of pink. The child empties their other pocket onto the table and a handful of flower petals tumble out. The child adds those flowers to the paper, and next they write a few words. Everyone close by starts to smile and nod their heads, and those in the back press in close to see what's causing all the excitement. The mill owner clears her throat to get everyone's attention. She begins to speak. A terrible thing has happened here today. There has been tension in our town for a very long time. Everything I worked so hard to build, my business, my mill, my paper, my reputation, all ruined by a few angry people. Or at least that's what I thought. It's what we all thought just now. But today's events have shown us just how wrong things are in our town. And now we can see what work needs to be done. Some things just can't be undone. We can't make this paper look new again, but the mill owner holds up the pink flowered paper, and on it is written, "Make something new." You see, this simple phrase didn't fix all the problems in the town. It didn't make all the problems of the East and the West Side residents disappear, but it did help them to see the problems they'd been ignoring for a long time. And they realized they didn't have to continue doing things the same way just because it's the way they'd always done it. It would take a lot of hard work from all the residents of the town to make a better mill. No one could put that paper back the way it was before, but they had an idea. That old regular white printer paper mill could transform. It could be something new. It could become a fancy floral stationery paper mill. And no one could put the town back the way it was before. It would take a lot of hard work from all the residents to make a better town. But they had an idea, a beginning, and a spark to fight to make something new. And now I turn you over to Betsy, who will introduce the Joys and Sorrows segment of our worship.
Thank you, Jess. During this next musical interlude, we invite you to write your joys and sorrows in the chat portion of your Zoom screen. The icon will either be at the top or bottom of the screen and allows you to enter text into the panel where others can see it. At the end of the musical interlude, Reverend Dawn will read what you would share with the congregation gathered here today. Please remember that a recording of today's service will be available on the internet. So as a reminder, please do not share things that ought not to be posted to the internet for eternity.
Each week we gather here in this space, whether we are in our virtual gathering today or as we have in the past in our building, but we gather and we share the things that weigh on our minds. We carry them with us all week, but here's a place where we get to share them with one another. And some of them bring us joy and some of them bring us deep concern, or us sad. So I will now read what you will share with us this morning. Sheila shares that she weeps for her country. I think as we all do this week. The McGahee family celebrated Steve's birthday last Monday, and the three wise kings came to our home this week, even though they're not in Mexico. Uh, I imagine that there is a special celebration of the Epiphany in the Familia McGahee household. John Brilla offers a joy that our awesome worship team has the virtual services down to a science. Um, Holy cow! Betsy Erba, I'm not sure if this is a joy or a concern or a little bit of both, offers that Oscar has submitted his application to high school yesterday. That happened all of a sudden, didn't it? Wasn't he just a little bitty guy a minute ago? Yeah. So I also want to offer prayers for the more than 20,000 people who died this week of COVID 19 in our country. We're averaging more than 4,000 a day now who die from this pandemic. Um, I also want to offer a special prayer for our own Melissa Hutchison, who was sick with the virus over the holidays. It knocked her down pretty hard, but she is recovering and will be for a while, I think. Also want to offer a prayer for the 600 or more than 600, of course, immigrant children who are being held still in concentration camps, separated from their families, with no clear path as to when and how they might be reunited. So, and now I found a really good prayer this week that just seems to work. And so I want to share it with you this morning. It's by Reverend Sarah Lawal. So I invite you to join me in a spirit of prayer. Spirit of life and love, holy mystery, how do we pray for hope? How do we bow down or look up or sit in silence or walk among the trees and make hope come alive when it feels so far beyond our grasp? We breathe, we look within, we listen, we reach out. We hold in the depths of our heart, knowing that hope is a gift we cannot destroy. It is the heartbeat always stirring within us. It is the imagination awakening us to possibility. It is the unfolding of faith in action. May we hold on to hope and carry it for one another. And for this broken and hurting world, may we be vessels of comfort and compassion. May we be vessels of peace and justice. May we be vessels of hope and healing. And may love prevail. In the name of all that is holy, thus we pray. Amen.
May I be filled with loving kindness. May I be well. May I be filled
We will now take a moment to give and receive the morning offering. This looks and feels a little different when we are separated by distance, and we're excited to announce we're rolling out a new way for you to give to UUCSJS online or text to give. As less and less people are using checks or carrying cash, offering a safe means to give online ensures we're providing you the most convenient methods possible to offer a gift of support to our church. As many of you are streaming our services online, we hope that this will be more convenient than mailing a check, though you are welcome to continue to do so if you prefer. Through our new online giving platform, you have the ability to give one time or set up automatic recurring gifts from a credit/debit card or through a bank ACH transaction. Our church does pay a small transaction fee to process online payments, but we feel the fee is well worth the convenience. If you choose to, you may be able to cover that fee for the church at the same time you give. We believe these new tools will allow us to continue to serve you well. We want you to know we greatly appreciate you and your heart of generosity as you continue to support UUCSJS. In the chat box, I'm going to place a link to make a donation, or you can use the Donate Now button on our website to make a donation. The PO box is also in the chat box. You may want to try our text to give option. You can dial 609-293-4495 and follow the prompts to enroll. Then all you need to do is enter the amount of the donation you would like to make. Each Unitarian Universalist congregation is supported self-supporting, and 80% of the funds of all that we do comes from the congregations of our members and friends. Thank you to all of you who faithfully send in your donations. A gift of any level is appreciated, and now, no matter how those gifts are offered, they are always most gratefully received.
From you I receive, to you I give. Together we share, and from this we live.
Our reading this morning is an excerpt of an essay by Reverend Dr. Jackie Lewis, published Friday by the Religious News Service. Reverend Lewis is the senior minister at the historic Middle Collegiate Church in Manhattan. The piece is called How the Capitol Police Privileged White Rage. When Black-led groups protest, the Capitol Police don't open barriers for us or gently point the way. I'm so damn tired of living in a country that treats Black grief as a threat and white rage as a sacrament. I'm upset, but I'm not shocked that self-entitled and enraged white supremacists, incited by our sociopath president, attacked our nation's Capitol building, just as I was angry, but not surprised, 4 years ago when the Capitol Police arrested members of our Black-led protest in that same building. Our crime? Singing with the Bishop William Barber III, Rabbi Sharon Bruce, and a gathering of multi-ethnic leaders outside then Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell's office to demand that the Republican Senate not take away the Affordable Care Act. I'm disturbed about the insurrection of January 6, 2021, and all the circumstances that led up to it. But I disagree with President-elect Biden's claim that this is not America. In fact, it is precisely who we are and who we have always been. White rage is privileged over Black grief. White rage turns violent when beautiful Black, trans, and queer people dare to walk down the street in freedom. The joy itself incites rage. Chants of Black Lives Matter cause enraged white people to counter that all lives matter. What they really mean is that if a Black life matters, then their white life doesn't matter enough. Black grief is not transient. It is generational, incarnate in our bodies. When Black grief dares to mourn publicly, dares to speak the truth of the permanence and pernicious nature of the white entitlement that formed our nation on stolen land and built it with the brutal system of chattel slavery, that grief is met with disdain. We're told to get over it. When teenage boys rap their grief, dance their grief, take their grief to the streets, that grief is criminalized, amplified, coded in words like Black on Black crime. When Black grief is expressed in writing, in social media, in art and song, it is fetishized, appropriated, caricatured. When Black grief shows up in the office and dares to speak up, demanding the demolishing of ceilings, white backlash and white rage interpret that grief as too angry for a team player who can't be coached and therefore not promoted. Black grief, which of course is angry, is shut down, cut off. Still, Black grief is prophetic. It knows how to weep, wipe its tears, and build a movement. It knows how to keep its eyes on the prize and hold on. It knows that anyone who believes in freedom cannot rest until it comes, until the death and the life of a Black mother's child is as important as a white mother's child. We are perched upon a dangerous precipice. The meager grains of Reconstruction were dismantled and gave way to Jim Crow because politicians ignored Black grief and acquiesced to white rage, as they did on Wednesday at the Capitol, as they did in Minneapolis in May. Which of us can forget the rage in the face of the white police officer who crushed George Floyd under his knee? Who could not recognize the white rage in the violent mob? Let's not call that protest. That rioted in our Capitol to disrupt our democratic process. That mob was handled gently, as though their rage was holy. White murderous rage has been tolerated, celebrated, and acquitted throughout our history. But now our leaders must take a different road, one that recognizes white rage for the terrorism it has always been, and tend to the Black grief that has been ignored and suppressed for far too long. As people of faith and moral courage, we must accept our leadership role and join together in prophetic grief and divine outreach to critique our racist culture in which being Black is a pre-existing condition for poverty, discrimination, and death.
Two 2021 has been a long year already, it feels like. The United States witnessed something this week unseen since the early 1800s, and that is an attack on and a breach of the United States Capitol building. by hostile forces. Not even during the Civil War, when the Confederate South was across the Potomac in Virginia, not even then were shots fired in the congressional chambers. But they were Wednesday. And that scene was made even more surreal by the fact that these insurrectionary rioters were incited and encouraged by the sitting president of our country. And for weeks, the current occupant stoked the anger of his followers via tweet. They organized openly on a variety of social media platforms about their plans to seize the government that day and debated which leaders ought to be priority targets for capture or execution. They showed up with gallows and a guillotine. The president told his believers at a rally earlier in the day that they would have to fight hard and with strength, not weakness, to take back their country, to seize back an election that he claimed was stolen. And he encouraged them to then march to the Capitol to deliver their mouth-foaming, rabid rantings in person. What could possibly go wrong? What emerged from that was an all-out assault on the building and people of our Congress, House and Senate, causing leadership to be whisked away by security as the chest-thumping revolutionary wannabes roamed the halls of the Capitol. Capitol Police barricaded the doors to the legislative chambers so that the remaining members of Congress could be escorted to safety as the mob pounded on the doors, breaking the windows and attempting to breach the gaping hole their destruction had wrought. One woman was shot and killed by police as she attempted to enter the House chamber before the room was safely cleared. 5 people died in Wednesday's failed coup, including a Capitol Police officer who was bludgeoned with a fire extinguisher. Anyone with an electronic device and an internet connection has no doubt seen all the frightening images of the carnage. What was on display this week for the world to see was the outrage of a portion of the US population who are utterly convinced that their country has been stolen from them, as though it was a thing to possess and not a pluralist community of which they are but one part. A deeper examination of this thinking is likely to reveal that the source of their grief and outrage is the loss of their own central role as keepers of the power in this country. These are the men, for the crowd was overwhelmingly very white and very male. These are the men who fear most deeply that they are losing control of something they have been taught for generations was theirs to possess. And not unlike abusive husbands, they have become most enraged and most dangerous and most violent now that their previously cowed partner has filed for divorce. It is as though there is a widespread feeling of emasculation that must be undone. After 8 years of President Barack Obama, the Black man who was successful and whose policies and efforts encouraged a culture in which bullying was named as wrong and immoral as opposed to the birthright of the strong. And their very relevance as dominant players was imperiled. They've had 4 years to try and reclaim that dominant role. And once more, in their mind, it has been taken from them. In her 2016 book, White Rage, Emory University Professor Carol Anderson identifies the trigger for white rage as Black advancement. She writes, "It is not the mere presence of Black people that is the problem. Rather, it is Blackness with ambition, with drive, with purpose, with aspirations, and with demands for full and equal citizenship. It is Blackness that refuses to accept subjugation to give up. A formidable array of policy assaults and legal contortions has consistently punished Black resilience and Black resolve. It was Carol Anderson. And it is our capitalist free market culture that encourages competition instead of collaboration, that feeds the idea of a scarcity model when it comes to dignity and justice as it applies to wealth and power. Now, in classic capitalism, two or more players compete to earn market share, right? If you build a better widget than your competitors, you have a better chance of selling more and thus making more money. The market is a limited pie of cash, and thus what one gains, another loses. Now, rights and justice, though, like love and dignity, do not come in portions limited like a pie cut into slices. But when you're afraid that someone is out to take away what you think is your fair share, your birthright place at the top, well, it feels like an attack. It feels like an attack on your power, like an attack on your identity as the top dog, the one in charge. Not only do they fear losing power and prestige, but they fear losing their very personhood and becoming irrelevant. The traditional order being challenged here is a constructed hierarchy of value among humans, a hierarchy built upon the arbitrary construction of human divisions. That's a real mouthful of words. So let me see if I can explain. In the United States, like in most cultures, there exists a pecking order among different kinds of people. And in the United States, we discern different kinds of people, first and foremost, by race. We have a caste system that functions just like caste systems in other places around the globe, but ours is based largely upon the color of a person's skin. And it has been that way from the very first day colonizers landed on the shores of North America. In her book, Caste, The Origins of Our Discontents, Pulitzer Prize-winning author and researcher Isabel Wilkerson describes the unique development of the caste system we now live with. She writes about the early colonizers. If they were to convert this wilderness and civilize it to their liking, they decided they would need to conquer, enslave, or remove the people already on it and transport those they deemed lesser beings to tame and work the land to extract the wealth that lay in the rich soil and shorelines. To justify their plans, they took pre-existing notions of their own centrality, reinforced by their self-interested interpretation of the Bible, and created a hierarchy of who could do what, who could own what, who was on top, who was on the bottom, and who was in between. They developed a caste system, she writes, based upon what people looked like, an internalized ranking, unspoken, unnamed, and unacknowledged, even by everyday citizens, even as they go about their lives, adhering to it and acting upon it subconsciously to this very day. Just as the studs and joists and beams that form the infrastructure of a building are not visible to those who live in it, so is it with caste. Its very invisibility is what gives it power and longevity. And though it may move in and out of consciousness, though it may flare and reassert itself in times of upheaval and recede in times of relative calm, it is an ever-present through line in the country's operation. That's Isabel Wilkerson who wrote that in her book, Caste. So this concept of a birthright entitlement to be the ones who hold the power and make the rules and benefit from those rules, then, it is woven into the fabric of our nation. It is truly in our cultural DNA. Sir Isaac Newton stated in his laws of motion that an object in motion will stay in motion unless it is acted upon by an outside force. Likewise, an object at rest will stay at rest unless it is acted upon by an outside force. So this stuff that's in our genetic makeup is not going anywhere unless we do something about it. This will not heal if we ignore it. It is more than a minor cut or a scrape. This is a systemic, historic, and chronic, and it's not going to move unless we move it. I have a therapist friend who describes the work of healing deep systemic emotional trauma as being like treating the victim of a motorcycle accident, as she did during her years as an emergency room nurse. The patient comes in with a lot of presenting wounds needing attention. It would be easy to apply some Neosporin and some bandages and send them on their way, but she said that's not actually going to work because there's a gravel embedded into the flesh and it must be exposed and removed before the wound can be washed clean and treated. And that, friends, is slow, painful work. But it has to be done before the real healing can happen. Left with the gravel and the road detritus buried in the skin, the wounds will fester and get infected, causing even more pain and suffering and requiring more radical invasive treatment. And here's the bad news. This is the work before us as a nation. Wednesday was the motorcycle wreck. So we can try to remove the images of violence from our memories, but the deep wounds remain and they must be addressed. The unpleasant realities exposed and illustrated in Technicolor for the world to see this week are as complex as they are painful. There are many layers of cultural bias at play here, as well as the disturbing tendency of people to be willing to believe the most outlandish conspiracy theories. There's a school of thought, I won't even say that term, school of thought. There's a particular group of conspiracy theories that believe that the Democratic Party is run by pedophile aliens that drink the blood of children and want to implant people with microchips. So either Jeff Bezos or Mark Zuckerberg or somebody can control them remotely. Okay, that's a stretch. That's a stretch. So, but what it all boils down to is one thing. People are treated very differently in the United States based upon the color of their skin. Now, our reading this morning from Reverend Dr. Jackie Lewis describes in unblinking terms the reality of how differently Black people and white people are treated by police in the United States. And we must not turn away from the images of police officers posing for selfies with rioters. Did you see those? Or for them seeming to open the barricades to allow the seditionists inside, and for their utterly boggling restraint from using violence. That riotous mob showed up prepared for conflict, and yet very few were killed or even injured. One person was killed by officers, we talked about that already, when she tried to breach the doorway of the House chamber. Another was trampled to death by her compatriots in the scrum. Another made the spectacularly poor decision to smuggle a taser into the building and accidentally discharge the weapon in his pants, causing a fatal heart attack. A fourth person also suffered a heart attack, the details of which are not public yet. So only one person was killed by police, and that was while in the act of trespassing with violent intent. Had those rioters been black? Had those rioters been black, I do not have to explain how different the outcome would have been. You know as well as I do what that would have looked like. In the last week of May into the first week of June of 2020, nearly 500 people were arrested in Washington, D.C., protesting police killings of unarmed Black people. Nearly 500 were arrested. Countless others were injured. Unarmed protesters were met with thousands of law enforcement officers in full tactical military-grade riot gear. And those officers fired rubber bullets and chemical agents at the protesters, who were simply asking to not be killed. This week, we saw footage of police officers helping people down the steps of the Capitol building on their way out after their violent invasion. Americans' racial caste system is very, very plain to see. Now, as sensitive human beings, we don't like conflict like this. We don't like to see it. We don't like to see that kind of anger on display. We don't like the threat of violence that comes with it and the harm it causes. It is our instinct to want to heal it, to want to wrap things up, stop the bleeding, find a speedy and clean resolution, and move on and away from the unpleasantness. But I need to caution you. It is far too early to be calling for healing. The wound is still fresh. The bone has not stitched. Like the victim of the motorcycle accident or the long-term trauma survivors, there is a lot of painful work that we need to do if we want to move forward without a cultural and spiritual scar that always aches and limits our ability to function. And in this effort, we cannot compromise. This is not the time for incrementalism or finding common ground. In issues of justice, seeking the elusive middle ground is not an act of moderation, it is an act of capitulation. Where is the model ground in the question of slavery? Is indentured servitude okay, but not outright chattel slavery? What if chattel slavery is okay, but you actually worry about working conditions? It's insane. There is no middle ground in that argument. It's right or it's wrong. People are human or they're not. British philosopher and author Raul Martinez, wrote in December 2019 in a piece published by Novara Media, he writes, the center ground doesn't necessarily represent majority opinion. It is a consensus of the powerful. In the US, for instance, public opinion has for decades been in favor of universal health care, right? Public opinion has been in favor of universal health care, while most US politicians, Democrats and Republicans, have staunchly opposed it. The shifting center ground has reframed political perceptions to such an extent that someone like Bernie Sanders, who would have been regarded as a middle-of-the-road politician in the mold of President Franklin D. Roosevelt, has long been characterized as a radical insurgent. for daring to argue that people should have access to a doctor if they're sick. He writes, struggles to abolish slavery, end child labor, resist colonialism, extend voting rights, achieve racial and gender equality, and grant basic human rights to all required courageous members of society to challenge the dominant identities and narratives of their day. And those who did were labeled as extremists and sometimes punished with imprisonment or death. It's easy to look back at the injustices of history with moral clarity and ignore the fact that this clarity owes its existence to the hard work of those who came before us. Our moral compass is the outcome of yesterday's sacrifices and struggles. And that's Raul Martinez. Now, we all like to quote Dr. King's letter from a Birmingham jail. But this week, especially, the poignant part of that letter is his disappointment with moderate white progressives. He writes, or wrote, in 1963, I have almost reached the regrettable conclusion that the Negro's great stumbling block in his stride toward freedom is not the white citizen's counselor or the Ku Klux Klaner, but the white moderate, who is more devoted to order than justice, who prefers a negative peace, which is the absence of tension, to a positive peace, which is the presence of justice, who constantly says, I agree with you in the goal you seek, but I cannot agree with your methods of direct action, who paternalistically believes that he can set the timetable for another man's freedom, who lives by a mythical concept of time, and who constantly advises the Negro to wait for a more convenient season. Shallow understanding from people of goodwill is more frustrating than absolute misunderstanding from people of ill will. Lukewarm acceptance is much more bewildering than outright rejection. Dr. King continues, I had hoped that the white moderate would understand that law and order exist for the purpose of establishing justice, and that when they fail in this purpose, they become the dangerously structured dams that block the flow of social progress. I had hoped that the white moderate would understand that the present tension in the South is a necessary phase of the transition from an obnoxious negative peace in which the Negro passively accepted his unjust plight to a substantive and positive peace in which all men will respect the dignity and worth of human personality. Actually, we who engage in nonviolent direct action are not the creators of tension. We merely bring to the surface the hidden tension that is already alive. We bring it out in the open where it can be seen and dealt with, like a boil that can never be cured so long as it is covered up, but must be opened with all its ugliness to the natural medicines of air and light. Injustice must be exposed with all the tension its exposure creates to the light of human conscience in the air of national opinion before it can be cured. As Unitarian Universalists, we sometimes confuse our commitment to affirming the inherent worth and dignity of all people as an obligation to not offend people or hurt their feelings. But our commitment to the inherent worth and dignity of all people does not mean we get to sit by idly while someone with power, even one of our own, attacks someone without it. Yes, the attacker has inherent worth and dignity due to every human being, and their violence is unacceptable. And frankly, when we fail to interrupt abuse our behavior is unacceptable as well. Now, I remember lessons from my Catholic catechism in which I learned about sins of commission and sins of omission. A sin of commission is when I hit someone. A sin of omission is when I see someone get hit and fail to stop it. Okay? Too often we default to the, it's not my place to judge approach, which has the effect of offering our silent approval to the one doing the harm and communicating to the victim that our own need to avoid conflict outweighs our obligation to relieve their suffering. Bishop Desmond Tutu famously said, and I'm paraphrasing broadly and terribly here, if you take a neutral position when you see a situation of injustice, you are favoring the oppressor. If an elephant is standing on a mouse's tail and you do nothing, the mouse will not see your action as neutral. So now, if we fail to act in this time, we take the side of the oppressors. We take the side of the plainly racist culture and policies of the police and law enforcement and our dominant culture in the United States. This is not the time to seek common ground, closure, or healing. Now is the time to demand transparency and accountability. For without those, we are doing nothing more than putting a smiley-faced Band-Aid on a festering wound. We must have an investigation into what happened. We must learn how this breach happened. We must learn who made the strategic and tactical decisions that failed so badly, and we need to hold them accountable. This is going to make people uncomfortable. The people who were at fault and us. But we need to hold accountable all those who defiled and ransacked the sacred civic space of democracy, and work to ensure that the world understands that such behavior will never go unpunished. We must hold accountable all those who aided and abetted the insurrectionists, those who urged them on, riled them up, got them lathered up and furious, and then pointed them in the direction of the Capitol and told them to march. We must hold accountable those who peddle conspiracy theories and demand that our officially licensed broadcasting entities be regulated so that they are not permitted to produce and promote material that is factually untrue. You know, Fox News is not allowed to broadcast in Canada. It's simply not available. Because Canada has regulations forbidding the presentation of lies as truth in journalism. That's against the law. You can't do that. We don't have that law here. So we must demand a Truth and Reconciliation Commission that encompasses all of the governmental crimes of the last 4 years. Police brutality, babies in cages, environmental catastrophe, international corruption, crimes against humanity, pandemic allowed to kill thousands, hundreds of thousands of people. All of it, like a wound from a motorcycle accident, must be brought to light, scrubbed clean, rinsed clear, exposed to sunlight, and allowed to heal. We must demand that the truth be exposed, and we must acknowledge our own complicity where that is the case. None of us is without blame in this nation. None of us. We could all have done more. If we have not directed participated in direct violence, we have benefited from hundreds of years of racially based caste system that lifts some while oppresses others. So our job now boils down to 3 very simple steps. Number 1, educate ourselves. Read a book. If you don't know what book, Google it. Educate ourselves about racial justice, about economic justice, about gender justice. It is not the job of the oppressed people to educate those with privilege about our privilege. It is not the job of Black people to do the emotional labor to teach white people about the Black experience. Do your homework. Read uncomfortable books and articles. And if you're not sure where to start, do a Google search for anti-racism reading list and start there. If you're not familiar with Google, or if you struggle with it, ask your librarian. They are ninjas when it comes to intellectual justice. They will show you where to go. Number 2, we need to work to undo the damage that's been done. Simply saying, I'm sorry, is not enough. Paper crumpled into a ball will never lay flat again. We need to own our part in this injustice, and we need to work to repair the damage that's been done. And number 3, we need to follow the lead of those who are most marginalized. This is not about us leading anything. We ought not to be at the front of any march or any parade. This is about us showing up and marching with a sign and offering help and support. But we need to not take the lead. Our role is to be right-sized, to listen, and to take direction. 2021 has already been a very long year. It was just Tuesday night that we were celebrating the win in Georgia, all right, early Wednesday morning, but still, the electoral win in Georgia that flipped the Senate. But oh boy, hasn't it been a year since then. So there's hope on the horizon. But I have to tell you, a new presidential administration will not undo the damage that's been done. And it will not permit us to ignore the deep traumas that must be addressed. And I'm here to tell you that I am committing to this work personally. And I'm saying this out loud for accountability purposes. I encourage any one of you in the coming year to say, so what are you reading now, Dawn? Okay? Because that's my commitment, is to continue my own education. I need to learn more about all kinds of things, including my own privilege, and how I can best be helpful to those who have greater marginalized identities than my own. Normally at the end of a sermon, I encourage you to some course of action at this point in my sermon, but today I'm not going to encourage you. Today I am going to morally charge you to take action. This is not a gentle encourage. This is not a gentle nudge. This is a rather abrupt kick in the pants, if you will. We are past the time for encouraging action and well into the realm of that action becoming a moral imperative. So, go now, read, work, follow. Get yourselves right-sized. Work for justice. The time for compromise is gone. Let's do this. Our closing words this morning come to us from Margaret Wheatley. In this new world, you and I make it up as we go along, not because we lack expertise or planning skills, but because that is the nature of reality. Reality changes shape and meaning because of our activity, and it is constantly new. We are required to be there as active participants. It can't happen without us, and nobody can do it for us. Words of Margaret Wheatley. I invite you now to join me in reading together the words for extinguishing our chalice. We extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts until we are together again.
Here comes the sun. Here comes the sun, and I say it's all right. Little darling, it's been a long, cold, lonely winter. Little darling, it feels like years since it's been here. Here comes the sun. Here comes the sun, and I say it's all right. Little darling, the smiles return into the faces. Little darling, it seems like years since it's been here. Here comes the sun. Here comes the sun, and I say it's all right. Sun, 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 here it comes. 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 Little darling, I feel that ice is slowly melting. Little darling, it seems like years since it's been clear. Here comes the sun. Here comes the sun, and I say it's all right. Here comes the sun. Here comes the sun, and I say it's all right.
We have some announcements this morning. Reverend Don is available for pastoral care appointments Wednesday through Friday from 10 a.m. to 3 p.m. You can email minister@uucsjs.org to schedule an appointment. The book club meets this week to discuss the book Pavilion of Women. Contact Barb Morrill for more information. Families are invited to remain on the Zoom call. Anyone is invited to remain on the Zoom call. Following coffee hour this morning to watch RE on TV together. It's always a really good, enlightening time. There's always good company and discussion. As many of you may be aware, a search committee has been formed to hire a new director of music and arts at UUCSJS, on which I and other folks are serving. Your first opportunity to participate formally in the search process is going to be an after-service coffee hour forum next week on January 17th. We're going to be holding brief breakout talks about what you would like in our new Director of Music and Arts. So please stay tuned, see the midweeks for more information, and just come ready to tell us your thoughts next week. And the committee will post updates in the midweeks and keep you informed. Please take the opportunity to keep virtually connected through participating in some of our online events. This week, as you can see on your screen, we have several folks, groups meeting. Heartfulness meditation meets Monday, Wednesday, Thursday, and Saturday. Buddhist Sangha meets Tuesday. The book club gets together on Friday, and Spirituality in Practice is on Saturday. You can visit uucsjs.org/calendar for details. If you need to schedule a meeting or event, please reach out to our administrator at uucsjsadmin@gmail.com for use of the Zoom room or to be added to the calendar. UUCSJS member, physician, and now COVID-19 survivor, Melissa Hutchison, is not up for giving us her usual complete update on the status of the pandemic here in South Jersey, but she will be available in the main room during coffee hour if people have specific questions you'd like to ask, and she will return to offering more generalized updates next week. We warmly welcome all of you who are visiting us today. Please stay and socialize in our online social time so we can get to know each other better. Now let us share in a moment of silent reflection to consider today's message and the meaning it has in our lives.